Okay, I'll call the special meeting to order. Um, First, we'll do a roll call, and please note that all directors are present and in person. Do I have a volunteer to read the mission and value statement? Thanks, Aaron. Go for it.
At Decorah Community School District, we embrace student learning and well-being as our fundamental purpose. We will, in partnership with our students, families, and community, make the world a better place. The mission of the Decorah Community School District is learning, thriving, creating our legacy. The vision of the Decorah Community School District is Decorah Community School District will be a collaborative, innovative, learning-centered organization, empowering students to embrace their personal strengths and create their future.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a few items on the agenda today. The first is, we'll go into exempt session, and the title of that is Bargaining Strategy and Negotiation Sessions for Union Employees and Strategy Session for Non-Union Employees. So there will be a break in our live stream, and we'll ask guests that are in the room to politely leave the room. And then our meeting will be recorded for a later reference, but we'll invite everyone back in when we're done.
And as a point of clarification, we've already settled with the union employees, so this is a strategy session for non-union employees.
Okay. Welcome back, everyone. So after conversation about our negotiation sessions and pay, we've talked through some really specific situations, but then we've also acknowledged that there's a lot of special things happening in the Decorah Community School District that we want to make sure that we are reimbursing those teachers and staff that are putting in the extra time and effort. So bravo to all of our school staff.
Yeah, I will make a motion that we approve the,
Agenda wise, we're on old business right now.
Business number 5, second reading.
We'll take a motion for sure.
when are we gonna,
So
oh, under new, okay, under
Yeah.
7.
Yeah. Okay, so next on the agenda is old business, second reading of code 705.1 R2. Purchasing, bidding, using federal funds and procurement with contracts. And this is the second reading. We need to update this policy to
get our,
partner with a grant for security.
yeah,
cameras.
get our safety grant from the federal government. That's part of that $50,000. So I highly recommend that we add this,
Mhm.
approve the second reading because then we can submit it and have our policies up to date.
Make a motion that we approve the code section 705.1 R2 for second reading.
I'll second that.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next, I'll ask for an approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Could we switch around and do tennis courts first, or,
I would like that.
yeah, because these people have been waiting a long time already.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda with the discussion of the tennis courts first.
How about the approval when we're at the easy point now? Yeah.
Okay,
We should have done that 45 minutes ago.
all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, that was Aaron.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah. All in favor, please say aye.
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 You're right.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion carries. So first we'll talk about the discussion and approval of the tennis court location. And this is a topic of discussion because in historic conversations about the new school elementary project, in preliminary drawings that were shared both with the school district and with the city council, tennis courts were not included. And the facilities committee has been meeting for months. We've been working with our architect. And as that committee moves forward with plans, a board conversation is necessary to decide should tennis courts be included in this project. And the new information is that that the school district now owns the entirety of Hively Island.
And I'm gonna make sure that we clarify, should tennis courts be included in the Hively Island? Tennis courts are gonna be part of the project. We're gonna have tennis courts somewhere in the
Yes.
district. Don't wanna have anybody get I actually can think of a hinker and he's not named Brian that I see every Tuesday and he would be having a small heart attack, I'm afraid. And so we will have tennis courts. It's just kind of the location. And yes,
Yeah.
the big change was, I think when we first started looking at this, we didn't have a vision that we would own the whole Hively Island,
Mhm.
which the board did purchase. So then it kind of freed up the opportunity to have tennis courts on site at the Hively Island. And if we're ready for discussion, I might
Yeah.
turn it over to Mr. Riley, because historically I know he's done a lot with this.
Yeah, and for the purpose of today's discussion, thanks coaches and school staff for being here, and I'd really like us to consider pros and cons of this Hively Island site versus elsewhere.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, the exploration of tennis courts and locations I know for me, and Andy Nimrod at the time, and even Mr. Berlin's here, and Reg and Ron Gesme, kind of really began right around 2006, 2007. When we originally only had 4 courts on the John Klein property, and we needed to expand to 6, and those conditions were deteriorating, and we were really trying to explore all the different options throughout the community, where we had a full-fledged matrix that was developed at pros and cons of multiple locations, even spaces and properties that we didn't necessarily own. Trying to be able to get ourselves to 6 courts. And really, when it came back to it, and it still sat in front of the board, I believe it was about 2009, where we had 2 different meetings where we had one configuration that everybody wasn't feeling really comfortable with, and we came back a few months later with a configuration that you currently see with those 6 courts. And the pros and cons really laid out in a lot of different ways based off a joint use of hard surface play area for John Klein. One of the other things that tipped the scales is the way that configuration was. It allowed a separation of the grass area and some elements of a protective barrier between students and actual traffic that would occur on Claiborne. And that into things, so there became some real benefits. And then from a program standpoint, for the high school, having that location being in the proximity of the high school, what it was some significant advantages within that. You know, Luther, the relationship with Luther and the high school and the tennis program has been excellent for a lot of different years. But it's very clear there's certain moments in time where they have to meet their needs for their students as they plan and prepare. And we also need to be able to plan and have our needs met as well. And the need for 18 courts in town becomes really significant from March until the end of May. In terms of being able to have that availability and for us to continue to be as a good appropriate player. However, the configuration where we're at, where there's six courts directly across from the high school, has a significant impact from the school standpoint and the management of the programs, from even shuttling kids practices, just the general attendance at a tennis meet, where people are actually able to be there in that direction. So I know from our standpoint and the coaches as well, that's a concern that they really we're actually excited when the whole Lively Island was purchased, and through the many discussions that we've had to be able to come back and say, hey, tennis courts at that piece of property are still in play. And I know both Matt and Amanda were excited to be able to hear that and know that that's a possible option for us to continue to be able to discuss within that. From a community standpoint, I don't want to be able to speak out for Park and Rec, but obviously the dynamic of how pickleball has evolved, as well as the central location of that area and not having the pickleball in a residential area, there is a benefit and a draw when it comes time for that. The school's need for lighting isn't necessarily the same as what the city and the community side of things is from a Park and Rec standpoint, but I think that's a continued discussion that we'll need to be able to evolve.
Joint playground space. As a former elementary principal, I love the joint playground space, but I know we're not playing tennis on a hard surface blacktop. We're going out for recess on a tennis court.
Right.
So it's a little bit higher standard. But I love the joint use of space because we have such little space, and it's nice to be able to have that for our elementary school. Pros and cons to that. I mean, I can imagine in a perfect world, if I'm a tennis coach, I'd like to have my very own tennis court and not have elementary students on it during the day.
Yeah, I mean, to have a designated tennis space that and I don't want to speak for the tennis purists, but in terms of the tennis purists, that matters. But we also live in a valley, and being able to get more bang for our buck, I think, in relation to have some joint use space has its advantages, without a doubt. And I think even back in 2011, when we actually built this current configuration of courts in the way that had been held, I think there was some benefits to that everybody wasn't in agreement initially, but then once the kids really got out to be able to use that space, it was good. Now, to your point and to your question, does that mean there's some more work that needs to happen on a continual maintenance and a servicing standpoint? Yes, there is. There's been a lot of deferred maintenance on the current courts that we have based off of, where will they locate and what happens with the John Klein property? Because those actually should have been, usually you're on a 7 to 10 year rotation when you're actually going to want to resurface those. And now we're on year 13 from when those were originally built in the fall of 2011. And they have not been resurfaced, and there's some crack repair that has happened and occurred. So that will be something that will continue. I can to resurfacing the whole other track.
Mhm.
And we'll need to be ready to be able to continue to be able to do that once we get ourselves settled into a true spot.
And I know at one point we talked about a number, Adam, tennis court resurfacing costs roughly.
Yeah, I had gotten a quote. It was, gosh, it was last summer that I had gotten a quote and it was right around $100,000.
Which one of the reasons, of course, you're deferring it, you wouldn't want to put $100,000 in if you're passing a bond to building a
Yep.
school.
Yep, and we've had Iowa Tennis Court Services come in and do some repair on some cracks, but not to the same level of repair that they would do if they were actually resurfacing. And there was some improvement, but obviously that's only going to continue to grow and expand over a period of time until you really resurface it completely.
We've got basketball hoops on 3 of the courts?
No.
Just one.
Just one.
Because the 2 hoops are actually to the east end of that.
They're not on the tennis courts though, aren't they? Aren't they on the playground?
No,
No.
Oh, I didn't realize there were tennis courts.
Yeah.
I
So it
mean,
doesn't impact pickleball. My question is, does that come into play?
you know, it hasn't a ton. I mean, they're hanging over that area and they get used some during the recess, but kind of that age, they're not using it at the same level as what you'd see in our 3-4 or, purely.
So it's not a huge impact other than just the shared use of being a hard surface playground.
On the end of that court, there is additional space. It's not like the court ends at the normal side, there's an extra, extra width, so the basketball courts or basketball hoops are slightly off a little bit, so that's.
Okay.
So my question, I was on the board back in 16, 17, we had lots and lots of conversation and boy, it was a long process. And I know we've had this multiple conversations with the city, different things, and 2 things, the softball field, because the softball field and the tennis courts. So the diagram that, or some of the drawings that I've seen and worked with over the years on the new school facility on the Alcott Island, I like some of the drawings a little bit better than some of the current drawings we have. And I think what's happened is the tennis courts were taking up a lot of space, and I think the way they're drawn, and I think the way they're drawn, I don't think they're really they're out of the way of the school, and they're more like a captive tennis space than a shared space. So the question I think I'm hearing is, the tennis coaches are probably okay continuing to have tennis courts as a shared space for the elementary school building. Then, okay, that makes me feel better because I don't want to have tennis courts impeding on some really precious part of the property and not be part of the overall plan and maybe not get as good of a school plan as we would have. I didn't want the tennis courts to drive our multi-million-dollar project here.
Right.
And so I think that's really neat and good that you continue to say, yeah, we can, if we get new tennis courts, to keep them in that particular location, that they can be used for joint space and that works. And I think we probably would have the ability then to, knowing they'd be there for a long time, to put the general maintenance over time and continue to do a better job than we have been doing. I know tenure back in 2007 or 8 or whatever it was, the city, as we both talked about putting some money into a fund and build that fund up for the repairs and stuff. And so I think probably, even though we're gonna pay for them, I believe, the city might put the lighting in. I'm sure we're probably still talking about that. Probably still be maintained by us in the city both, I would assume.
I guess to that point, and I don't want to completely speak for the tennis coaches, but in our conversation, the way the courts have been used since we did it and created this arrangement in 2011 for that to continue in that same fashion, I think everybody's comfortable with how that's working for entities. And when it comes time to your point, anything that we needed to do, obviously Andy being retired has an impact, but Shirley and I were always able to really work things out in relation to what is it we need, what's that we not need.
Yep.
Even, once we get the courts built, we built, a restroom area and a storage area, and that was a very good joint project at the city, and we were able to work together to give us support that needs. So there's nothing on my end of thing that would indicate that would continue.
Now, why don't we just have those who have taken the time to attend,
Yeah.
speak up?
Can I
Yeah.
ask you guys a question to answer when you talk? You know, where the proposed, the school is gonna be built, like where the playground and the courts are now, the new school. So do you have suggestions for which end of the island would be best suited for the courts? And also, is it important for the 6 courts to be all next to each other? Or is it just as advantageous to have 3 courts this way and maybe 3 courts perpendicular? Could you just kind of talk about the configuration of the courts and location of the courts too, as you're kind of giving us your information?
Sure.
Okay.
No,
Okay,
so whether it's 6 in a row like it is now, or a bank of 3 and 3, I don't think,
It doesn't.
doesn't matter.
I would not want anything.
But perpendicular running would be a little odd. If you had 3 one direction and 3 another direction, just. Like that.
And just for the record, and so anyone that might be watching knows who's talking, can you tell us who you are and your role?
Yeah, Matt Anderson, the head boys tennis coach at the high school. So, and then in terms of location, whether it's East End or West End or something in the middle, even, I don't know the layout. Would say the East End, depending on configuration and what changes with roads and everything, there is somewhat of a natural windbreak there. That would be nice. You know, just where the street comes up and it sits down with that hill there.
There's a bank of trees along
And there's a bank of
there
trees.
too. Would that be an issue for leaves and whatever debris falling down in the courts?
Cleaning the leaves is worth having them there as a windbreak. So, yeah, that I don't see as an issue personally. And then there's. I'm probably way beyond where I need to be here, but you know, how to build the tennis courts. You can put down concrete or you can put down asphalt. I think we're mostly asphalt now, and Luther went concrete plus when they built theirs. And you know, I played at Luther, used those courts for many, many years, and they had many issues there on that space at Luther until they went with what they've got now. Without getting into the details of that, I think we've got 8, 9 years now of those courts in play, and they're not cracked on. I mean, those have held up incredibly. So in terms of a fund for resurfacing and what material we use and how we build them, maybe a little money up front saves you money on the back end. Because really, like Luther's now discussing a resurfacing project on theirs, and their resurfacing project is literally going in and just putting a skim coat on the top. Putting a line back, that breaks the cost way down to the cents when they don't have those cracks. That's not 2 cents.
I'm Amanda Inger, I'm girls tennis coach. Just a few other things. We both have pretty large programs. We are already the longest at practice of any spring sports team, because we have so many students, and that's a great problem to have, but it also is a big strain on coaches, and adding transportation into that, adding parking issues at Luther into that, it would increase our time even more. I run 3 separate practice sessions. They have middle schoolers who come over to participate. They walk to the high school. I'm a teacher at the school. It's really hard for me to hustle out to the courts at 3:20 if I have to add in drive time. That's a lot of kids driving separately to a different area of town, because they have to drive separately because they all have separate practice times. Whereas right now, kids who are in the second group often stay in the cafeteria, they do homework. They live pretty close to the school. So those are just a few additional reasons that it's definitely beneficial to have courts on our campus.
I did not know that you had different sessions of practice to meet the needs of all the kids.
You
And
can,
75 athletes on
On
6
6
courts.
The most, it's logical to have on a court at practice sport. And so that means 12 girls and 12 boys. We often bring more than that, and
Yeah,
that means less hitting for every player, and that hurts the program. So we do what we have to do, but you know, taking 20 more minutes to ship up to Luther. Hurt. But hopefully that's not what
mhm,
Larry Berlin, former coach. I started out with 2 courts. I had 42 girls out the first year. It didn't work very well. It got better when we had 4 courts, and now it's gotten much better to 6. But as they were saying, I had 3, sometimes I had as many as 40 girls, and I'd have to have 3 shifts. And so when the track people are going back into the facility for the evening, I'm into my second group, and I would get home about 7 o'clock. So the point is here, we need to have a minimum of 6 courts. I mean, just, if we're gonna do it, let's do it right. The other thing I was gonna mention here is that right now, those 6 courts provide a tremendous barrier for balls flying out into the street, and for a place that's kind of a jail, I call it, for the people that are supervising the kids in that. I mean, it's got some real things, and it's not muddy, that they love running around with snow on there. And it's helping us because it clears the courts, the snow melts. So, I mean, there's so many good things about what we have cooking there. I'd hate to see that thing move somewhere else. I just would really hate to see that because we're losing an opportunity. And I would wish that somewhere down the road, we could get more usage of that hard surface for PE or for gym master or gym or whatever you want to call it. You know, more outside stuff because those courts are very, you know, they're not gonna get dirty or anything, right? And it's a bench, it's the thing. It keeps stuff from rolling around or flying out. It's really good.
It's a good containment area.
That's exactly right. And it
All
can be
the
really
first grade
utilized-
playground balls.
It can be utilized a lot more than what it is actually. And I mean, it's something that I've even looked into, maybe getting some kind of a little league tennis going, you know, on PE or something, with some people volunteer to come down. And we could have some, you know, maybe some stars down there, and then not.
We already do.
Yes.
We had a couple good. But no, I appreciate the opportunity to come in and talk to you folks. I could tell you a lot of stories about a lot of things.
that's helpful. So does the board have additional questions or comments? We've heard a lot about the benefits of what we have now with, obviously, with a new improved with a good surface to play on that's not cracked, but are there any disadvantages to having the tennis incorporated into this Hively Island site that we need to talk about or think about?
I really appreciate the idea of having them over on the east side, that natural windbreak is more important than other. I think that kind of opens up a little bit more area for Nick to be looking at, because I think he was feeling like he needed to cram him up in that corner, and maybe you know, to have it be jointly with the playground. And use that natural windbreak, I think that maybe gives him a little bit more room for options for figuring this out.
For green space.
Yeah.
Community, yeah.
Orientation wise.
East, west, north.
They have to be on a north-south axis. The actual courts. Yeah, put a tennis court on east-west axis.
Otherwise the wind's blowing one direction, so. Some.
Mhm.
Sun is a problem.
So
Obviously, don't have a problem in the diving board arena with the. Just kidding.
You can put it any direction. you want. Although I will say you have to be very careful, you put windows in a pool, otherwise the light does shine.
There you go,
directly.
yeah.
So,
Okay, so that's an important consideration also.
yeah, you just keep little tennis courts on
Yeah,
East
so
West
the way they're,
access
the way they're set now, that needs to be how they're
They're always
set.
set up, so.
It's important information for Nick to know.
Yeah.
He might already know that. I know that was a question that we had talked
Well,
about.
that,
He
on
might-
one of his drawings, he has them going the other direction along,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and those, the schemes that have been shared with the facilities committee so far have been those are not final. Or it's been very
Yeah,
preliminary.
very preliminary, but it's good to know not to mess with the orientation, that
Right.
it works, that it works.
Yeah,
So, and Nick did several different of the renderings for what we even currently have.
So my thought, just to be clarify this, you're okay if there's a separation between 3 courts and 3 other courts?
3 and 3 is fine if there's like viewing, less space in between for, like, right now, we have 3, there's a walkway and then 3. So that's where the kids put all of their things. It's where we stand up, and when we are coaching during matches, we can move easily from one side of the towards the other. If it's 3 and 3 this way, that's fine too. We just need that space in between as a concrete gathering space. It kind of becomes a great viewing area for parents. Some schools have that. They actually put like small bleachers in there so that you can watch either during the match, which is really handy. And then we would still have the whole side for coaching and seeing everything. So there's no negative to either one, I don't think.
We wouldn't want 3 on the east end and 3 on the west end.
No, that would be a problem.
That sort of separation.
Yeah, I would be there. It would maybe be fine for practicing. For meets, it would be problematic because we would have to be running back and forth between. We really need to be able to see all 6 courts for competition.
Mhm.
It'd be like asking a basketball coach to not watch half the court.
Yeah, I think one thing maybe for covering ancient history, when we've started this process, it didn't seem that we were gonna own the entire Ively Island. So initial discussions, not including courts there, was simply because we didn't know if we were gonna own the existing softball field and parking lot. Without that, we didn't have room. Thankfully, as things have turned out, we own all that, so now that's possible again. So if people are thinking, well, they weren't concerned about it 10 years ago, like, well, we weren't gonna have the full parcel of real estate. So thank goodness we do, and I think it would be silly not to incorporate them in the existing campus, so to speak.
I think you have to involve Whitemore too. What's the history or the future about Whitemore? Because that has a lot to do, I think, with what's true. I think that should be consideration. If you have a busy street there, it's nice to have a barrier. If it isn't going to be a busy street, there's no street there, then you can afford to maybe, put the courts off a bit.
yeah, and that's not the school board's business to decide
I
what
know,
happens
yeah,
on
that's fine,
city
I'm just
street.
saying.
So,
That certainly
yeah,
is
it's
something.
definitely something to be mindful of.
But we're not aware of any changes that they're planning to do with Claiborne.
No, I know there was a lot of concern about, oh, they're gonna close Claiborne. No, it's not our suggestion. We don't want to do that.
But it's only, this is a different conversation, but it makes sense that we had that conversation with the city and that we're on the same page, that we work together to make the tennis courts work and kind of go in there. So,
Yeah, because it'll be a shared,
Sure.
with a shared space with the community, so,
Yep.
yeah. We'll wanna keep-
And when the board did the when the board did the negotiations with the city and made this purchase, was there discussion about the shared use of the building of the tennis courts and the shared use of the tennis courts? Is there any kind of written or verbal agreement that we have with the city on this?
Would be verbal.
Verbal?
Well, there is an existing 2080 agreement, which still carries forward about the maintenance. But that, I don't think obligated anybody to do anything when things are rebuilt, but it was probably just an assumption.
There's conversations about who would pay for that, and not firm conversations, but there's lighting to think about, and if we move them somewhere else, the cost of giving the land and who's gonna build them. So there's been those conversations, but they haven't been held and discussed in detail because we really haven't determined where they would go.
Mhm.
So that's a conversation that needs to happen, especially if we're gonna determine that they're gonna stay on the island.
Right.
That conversation, and I don't think it'd be a bad conversation, but we can make sure we continue that and get some solid footing and more solid footing about where we're going forward. Agree with that?
Mhm.
I just,
And maybe the type of surface now needs to be added to that list, because that sounds like that could be a cost saving measure going forward if we consider a different surface.
you know, a lot of that we'll get into when it would come time to be able to do it and specs get written.
Mhm.
And within the specs, so saying, well, is it going to be asphalt or extension concrete, based on how it did. You know, we've got experience with that.
One thing that I keep asking, the question I'm asking is, you know, can we have less independent space for students on hard surface? Less independent if we incorporate some of the tennis courts in a with a thoughtful manner. That's what I'm all about.
Right, so that's an interesting question. Could we have less playground space that's paved and have one more tennis court? I mean, do the students on the playground, do they need that extra paved space that they have at John Klein now? Could it all be part of the tennis court?
That's,
And then the rest of it green space?
So to your point, if all of a sudden you turn it into 8 courts, knowing that you had the ability to be able to have a joint usage, I know there'd be some people that would be doing carpet, some of that, as well as when you're picking.
Yeah.
we've got a cost factor we need to look at it. So if we can just utilize the tennis courts as part of the hard surface space and not have additional hard surface space plus the tennis courts. That's my question. My question would be,
Right.
how can we locate them? And are you okay with doing that? So we put them in the right place to reduce cost and get the best overall facility that we can.
Kids have a lot of fun with tennis.
I know.
It's a
The
wild-
pickleball players do too.
That's a wild time out there.
Well, certainly that our tennis programs have been an incredible strength for a long time, and we want to keep it going. We're certainly serving the needs of our students by assuring that that can continue. It's a lot, it's a lot of kids involved in that activity. Obviously, they're getting a lot out of it, so it's a priority to preserve that.
I would just emphasize what we have right now and how that's operated at work. And how we got, it took a lot of work to kind of get to that point. And there was definitely some healthy collisions and opinions as that came along, but I think what we have right now really serves everybody quite.
Cindy, to your question earlier, I have not heard a con, or I cannot personally think of a con to this plan with potential building. I cannot think of one.
Okay. You know, I would encourage a motion. It would be really helpful for our architect and our facilities committee to continue to move forward if we had an official motion by the board, if we're ready for that.
I think it would have to be, in terms of the concept, we're not approving a set of specs or anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of a sense of the board. Yeah,
The direction.
yeah,
It would have to be a motion. It could be just a direction.
Yeah.
Are we in agreement that we think that the best
Yeah.
place for the tennis court?
So, right, so just as part of this discussion item. Yeah, we can
Yeah.
note that. Are there any concerns about? Do any board members have concerns about it being in this location?
No, I think it's the best location,
Great,
especially with the joint use.
yeah.
Makes-
Well, it was really helpful to hear from coaches and
It was. I
and
think get
staff,
your
so thank you for
information
being
about
here
that.
and speaking up. Super helpful.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is approval of the classification and administration staff. So we, as I mentioned before, went into exempt session to talk about different specific elements of changes for this year. And staff retention is important for Decorah schools, so we want to make sure that we are supporting staff the best we can.
I would make a motion that we approve the 24-25 support staff salary schedules as presented by the administration.
Are you intending to do support staff, one at a time, or one of the, we've got
just
3 groups to
go-
do,
Yeah, I was just saying, all of the categories on that.
okay.
Only addendum I would make would be, we had discussion around, an assistant principal contract. But I don't think is reflected by what's written on paper here.
That is not, I think, as presented,
Court staff, you're not doing admin?
we're gonna do them all in one,
Okay.
as presented and discussed in the exempt session, I think is an appropriate way to do it.
That's the
Okay,
thing I wanted to make sure we were saying.
okay,
Support staff and admin as discussed in exempt. I'll second.
and I should, and, I'm sorry, but, I would say, and then the supplemental salary proposals, do you wanna do those separate, or do you wanna do those as presented in this?
My intent was to include
Everything we
those in
discussed,
the-
okay,
everything that was presented and discussed,
okay.
with the note that, Aaron thankfully brought back to mind, so.
Yeah.
So we have the motion in a second. Any further discussion or questions? Okay, hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. And I'll call the meeting adjourned as we're at the end of our agenda.